In the Wild West world of podcasting, there is one podcast that is authentic and genuine and continues to stand tall in its originality. Based on a passion for his guests, their work, and his love of podcasting, Derek Thomas and Monday Morning Critic Podcast get amazing, diverse, unique guests found nowhere else. The variety and quality are endless. There is something for everyone. Derek Thomas is the hero you deserve. He's a silent guardian, a watchful protector. Welcome to Monday Morning Critic Podcast. Here is Derek Thomas.
Cindy Mancini and Ronald Miller live on the same street, but they're in totally different worlds.
Wouldn't you like to be popular?
Cindy's hot, Ronald's not, but he's got a plan that could change all that.
I want to rent you.
Rent me?
Yeah. You pretend you like me, and we go out for just a few weeks.
Just going out with me is not going to make you popular.
Well, I have $1,000. It says it will.
Now, the biggest social transformation in history
No hand-holding, no kissing, and I get my lunch hour off.
is about to begin.
Okay, Donald, we're ready.
Well, Cindy, one last thing.
Yeah.
My name is Ronald, not Donald.
I think that's Ronald Miller. Didn't you like to mow our lawn?
Ronald's over in no man's land, and he's still alive.
He's going from totally geek
Totally chic.
Let's dance!
to totally out of control.
I have moves. All I ever did was think about you.
Say yourself. Don't change, please.
Me change? Never.
It's the comedy that proves $1,000 can buy popularity, but it can't buy me love.
He's such a heartbreaker.
My next guest is an absolutely wonderful actor, acting coach, musician. You know him from so many projects. Please welcome the very talented Courtney Gains. Courtney, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Hey, good. Thank you. How you doing?
Good. Courtney, let me ask you, as somebody who grew up in L.A. and having, you had a mother that understood the business and whatnot, you always read those stories about people that drop everything and move to L.A. Was it ever an advantage for you growing up and being born in L.A. versus, you know what, I live in, Maine, and I'm dropping everything because I'm going to move to L.A. and be an actor? I mean, this is like 30 years ago when people did that, right? But now it's a little different. But was it ever an advantage for you, Courtney, growing up and being born in L.A.?
I think it's a good question. I think so. Yeah, I think so. I've asked myself that before. If I had lived, say, in the Midwest and I had the dream, would I have had the courage to get out there? I'd like to think I would, but you never know, right? So not only was my mom, in the USO when she was a teenager, but my father worked as a laborer at Warner Brothers Studios. So, I used to take him to work sometimes and drop him off. So on Sundays, he would work double time, and he would work on Fantasy Island. I remember going on the set and things like that, just watching, seeing all the, going, this, all the green plants, they look so fake in person, going, this is what it looks like. But so the dream was always pretty, as far as accessibility, it was certainly a lot closer. I would have never met my mentor, Virgil Fry, had I not gone to an acting class on Ventura Boulevard, it certainly made it more accessible. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's a great story when it comes to Virgil Fry. For those listening, I mean, this is taped, so when they hear this, it's a really interesting story. But I'm curious about your dad because I want to get into your mom because very interesting person, really knew her stuff, great entertainer. So dad's a laborer. He works on these really iconic sets. So you see him what he does professionally, right? So as a son, Courtney, are you in awe of your dad? Are you like, God, I mean, my dad does these cool things? Or are you the kid that just absolutely adores his dad?
That's we're talking about my family now. That's a complicated ball of wax in some ways. I wasn't in awe of my father, but I was sort of amazed that he'd say oh yeah, I was in line for lunch and Ricardo Montalban was there, and I stood out of the way and said, go ahead. And he's like, no, you guys are working, you go ahead. So I'd hear little stories like that. I'd be like, oh, my dad just talked to Ricardo Montalban. How cool.
Yeah, and I realize family is always, one of those things. But, I just put myself, obviously everybody's different, but I would just think that would be such a great experience. And, as I mentioned, grew up, born in L.A., at 6 years old that you want to be an actor. 10 years old, Miss Gardner throws you into Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, you got the story right so far.
I don't know if it's creepy or impressive that I know that, but either way.
It seems to me like you're a professional who did his research. That's how I'm taking it.
Oh, thank you. So the one thing that I was going through when I was researching your life is that, how do you know at 6, right? Because I do believe kids that are gifted or destined to be what they want to do, I think they do know. I'm a firm believer in that early on. I think it's a thing. I do believe that.
I have no idea. It wasn't something I remember doing. It was something that my father told me. It was something that left such an impression on him that he remembered it. And then years later, as I started to really pursue acting for, seriously, which was around 13, he would start telling me things. And then when I started working professionally, he would remind me again. And he would just say how much when someone asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said, I looked him dead in the eye and he said, I'm going to be an actor. Like, what are you, stupid? And all I can remember is, from the time I was 10, I'd say is about when I can remember. And I was very clear. And I grew up in a tough neighborhood in Los Angeles. I didn't grow up in Beverly Hills, man. And when I would say, on the schoolyard, that's what I was going to do, it wasn't like it was, to be frank, be crass. They'd be like, "Oh, you're going to be a fag in tights." That's what they would say. I'd say, "You'll see." And then, once I succeeded, then now all those same jokers in the neighborhood I grew up in are like, "Oh, you made it out of the neighborhood, Holmes." And I'm like, "Yeah, I remember you. You were the lobsters trying to pull me back down into the pot. I know who you are."
Yeah, and it's a funny thing, Courtney, how that works, right? Because you're right. There was an association. If you were in the drama club or you were an actor, people would assume this or assume that. But now we look at 2021, it's the coolest thing. Or if you succeeded and went on to bigger things, then the perception changed. It's funny how life works like that, Courtney.
Absolutely. And yeah, things nowadays, unfortunately, people, if they when they ask kids what's the most important thing, you want to become a doctor or a lawyer, they all just say they want to become famous, which is kind of sad.
It is.
But yes, so you're right. It is more coveted. And yeah, honestly, in high school, I was literally the only guy who was in drama and playing a sport at the same time. So they were like two different worlds. I played basketball in high school. And they were like two different worlds, they were not worlds that people associated together. So whatever that's worth.
Yeah. And, we brought up Mom earlier and Mom, it was an entertainer, USO, really admirable thing. She felt her childhood, and I hope I'm quoting this correctly, I don't want to say wasted, but lost, right? Lost.
Yeah, she thought she lost her childhood somehow, which I could never really comprehend because she chose to do it. And she chose to do it, and she was doing it because she wanted to do it. And she had her own dance studio by 18 years old, and then gave that up for her first marriage. So she, up until that point of getting married and having her first child, my brother, she chose that. So I never quite understood where she was coming from.
Right. And she, at that point, for those listening, she comes to you and says, or you come to her and say, I want to take acting classes. I want to really invest myself in this. I love it. She's a little more hesitant. She says, I know what this road is like. It's not a pleasant one. And that's where,
she would talk about like the Jack and Coogan stories about how the parents, took advantage of the child actor and stuff. And then again, I'd be like, well, why? Are you planning on taking advantage of me if I succeed? So I never really understood where she was coming from exactly. But in hindsight, I actually think it was a good decision in that I was a pretty articulate and precocious kid. And if I had broken and gotten a series when I was like 10, 12 years old, I'd have been so obnoxious, man. And I would have had no respect for the crowd. I can tell you right now, I was a terror in high school. In grammar school at 10 years old, I was a terror. So give me a little power and a little money. I would have been off the chain. So it was a blessing that I had to study for 5 years in the professional workshop and watch other actors succeed before me in that workshop and keep working at it. So, and then once I started working, I didn't stop training. I had the foresight to say, I got to keep working at this, because if I'm going to make that adult transition, I got to be good, not just cutesy, you know?
Yeah. And this kind of, in a roundabout way, leads to what we were talking about earlier, your interaction with a man named Virgil Fry, who, for those listening, is, quote unquote, Punky Brewster's father. And
a damn good actor in his own right. I mean, he did a lot of work, and he did some very good work. And I respected him not just as a teacher, but I mean, because he could act, you know? Yeah,
no, very legitimate, certainly very legitimate actor. But the way you guys met, even you, I think, were wondering at the point where, who is this guy? Like, if you don't mind just telling a little bit of that story. I know you've told it.
Yeah. So I was coming out of this acting class that my mom finally put me in, and she put me in a class that was something she'd be familiar with, like, tap dancing and wearing tights, as a matter of fact, and I couldn't stand it. Like, I was like, this is not what I meant. I was looking for something gritty. So that was the third class. I wasn't clicking with anybody in the class. I was about to quit. And he stopped my mom on the street, and he said, excuse me, is your son an actor? He's got a great look. And they started talking, and he talked really kind of slow and really mellow, And I was just like, who is this guy? Like, is he for real? Because he was just talking he was just too chill. But when he mentioned his son was an actor and that his son was in on a commercial, I was like, okay. And it was when his son walked out, Sean Fry, that my eyes bulged, because Sean at that time was working a lot. He was in the original Fun with Dick and Jane, which was a movie I'd seen in the movie theaters. And I'd seen him in Movies of the Week with Elizabeth Montgomery. And I was like, this kid's good and this kid works. And if he's working, I said, well, I guess the father's a teacher. He must have taught him how to act, right? So that was so I said, okay, I'll check this class out. And that class was exactly what I was looking for. It was method. It was gritty. It was emotional. It was raw. Everything that I was looking for in a class. And it was all primarily adults, which was also very interesting and unheard of, that kids and adults would work together in the same class. That almost never happens. And for me, it was great, because I got along with adults a lot of times better than I got along with kids, but also it set up scenarios where you could have authority figure problems, or parental problems, which for a kid is what you're dealing with. You're always dealing with the adults in school. You're always dealing with adults at home, so it gave us something to work off of. That wasn't just two kids being cute. You know what I mean?
And before I get into like your just wonderful filmography, there's speaking of, you got me thinking about Comic-Cons for some reason. Do you do them? And two, what's your take on Comic-Cons? Because I cover them for the podcast, or I did before the pandemic. I'll be back this summer.
I don't do Comic-Cons. I haven't, because they're not really horror centric. And if I do horror conventions, and with my manager, the way I have it set up is, we're guaranteed a certain guarantee to show it financially. If they don't bring in enough people, we get paid. So it's like, it's financial,
Right.
And so it's done on a professional work. Comic-Con is like, we don't have to. We're Comic-Con, 50,000, 100,000 people are coming through here, which if I was in sci-fi, I would do, because you would do really well. But so, I've been doing conventions now for, I don't know, almost 15 years. And I stayed out of it for a long time, because the first one I ever saw was at the Beverly Garland in Hollywood.
Right.
And it was not a horror convention, but it was just a bunch of old time actors. And I honestly just thought it looked pathetic. You know what I mean? And I was like, I don't want to be that. To me, it looked like the graveyard of actors. And so I didn't want to ever be associated with that. But I kept getting egged on to do these horror ones. And I said, okay, I'll try one. And when I did, I was pleasantly surprised. One is that none of the actors are so successful that they can be a complete ass. Okay, that's number one. Honestly, it was not so much meeting the fans. It was like, I didn't want to be in a room with a bunch of actors. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, it does. It does. I get it.
I find a lot of actors can be precocious and full of it. And, it's like, it's not rocket science, man. You know what I mean? And it's like, ordering people around to go get you coffee or whatever bullshit. It's like, go get up and get it yourself. You know what I mean? It's like, I just don't like attitudes. So I thought, God, put a bunch of them in a room together. It's going to be, but it wasn't bad. And then the fans were really fun to meet. And it was, for me, it was really pre to me paying much attention to the internet. So I didn't really realize the impact some of these films had on people, particularly like The Burbs would be a really good example. there's a whole cult following for people who are huge Burbs fans. And it was great to get to meet all those people and realize the kind of impact that movie's had on some people's lives. So some people, when they're depressed, that's the movie they watch. And I mean, that to me is incredible. If I'm in a movie that can actually bring somebody out of a funk, God bless, man. That's awesome.
I think you're in a few of those, and I'm not just saying that. And I'm going to get into that as well. But you're right, man. I never thought about the horror cons. You're right. I mean, I see those, and I've been granted press passes to those. Those are really popular. The ones that are just horror, strictly just all about horror, and the popularity is through the roof, Courtney.
Yeah. Sci-fi fans and horror fans are the hardcore, and I always say, who would have known when, John Franklin and I did Children of the Corn together in '84 that, horror was not popular. It was, it was B movies, it was not, the critics hated it. The critics hated us. It was not sought as a thing. Now horror is completely mainstream, so we're now on the right side of history, but we weren't 30 years ago.
No, that's well said, and the other thing is you mentioned, your perception of cons early on, and I can tell you from covering cons, there's definitely people that don't want to be there. And like you are very fan friendly. That's clearly who you are. And there's guests I've had on the podcast that love meeting fans, but there's definitely the other side of that, Courtney, where they just,
I actually give, I'll be honest, I give people shit that's sitting there looking depressed, because, and nobody ever does, because they're afraid, people are afraid to talk to them or whatever. But I'm like, look, man, you could be laying bricks for a living. You could be laying roofs, in 100-degree heat. Right. This ain't shit. This ain't shit. You come here, you sit at a table, people come up to you, happy to meet you, and will pay you money to sign anything. If that was a job description in the real fucking world, pardon my French, who wouldn't take that job?
No,
don't show up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's so well said. That is so well said. I thought about you, I want to say 6 months to a year ago. Quentin Tarantino was on Jimmy Kimmel. And I think you've seen this before. Cause I think
the Hard Bodies VHS. Right?
Yes, you got it.
I somehow stumbled on that on Facebook, and I ended up posting it because I thought it was so cool. I couldn't believe Hard Bodies was the first one they pulled, and he was right. The description was terrible. He would have never guessed it was that movie. I would have never guessed it either. But that was so great to be in Tarantino trivia. I love it.
Yeah, and it's scary how really passionate he is, because he knows his shit. Because the way those descriptions are made, you just said it. I think the one for Hard Bodies was 3 middle-aged dads. That's definitely not how that movie unfolds. Like that's not.
Yeah, no dads at all.
Yeah,
that's
right.
Never even talked about. So that was wrong right there.
Yeah, and it's just his knowledge is really through the roof, and that led me to something else. A lot of people, and this has been, I feel like lately, the last year, Blockbuster has been like a really point of contention, right? And I do miss that, the idea of smelling a Blockbuster, going in there, seeing if the movie you want to see is there. If it's not, maybe we make our way to something we haven't seen. There's something to be said for that, Courtney, right? Those nostalgic Blockbuster video store days, right? There's something really beautiful and special about it.
It's funny. I certainly didn't think much about it at the time, but now that they're gone, it very much is nostalgia. Now that it's gone, I miss it, but I didn't think much about it at the time,
Yeah, and the one thing I really love, or one of the things I love about your filmography, it's really eclectic, right? You're not just one guy in 20 different movies, right? You're Whitey, right, to Kenneth, to Sergeant Eugene McVeigh. So you're clearly somebody who's not afraid of a role. We talked about Children of the Corn. In interviews, it seems like to me, and I this is one of the movies between this and The Exorcist, I don't know which movie I have a tough time rewatching it more, because they're both like A+ movies, but both have just scared the crap out of me. I mean, now at 47, before it was, 10, 11, 12 years old, still I can't sit through it. It's just so well done, but so scary.
I think Exorcist is a much quote unquote better film, much more better made film. I mean, I think Exorcist is probably the best quote unquote horror film ever made. So to even be in the breath of that, I'm like, wow, really? I'll take it. I'll take it. I think that's the movie, that first movie that I ever saw scared the hell out of me. I did see it in a movie theater. I was 10 years old. There used to be this little movie theater in our neighborhood that would, have, second run films. You could, my parents give me like $1.50 and I could get in the movie and buy some flicks and a soda and I was good to go, but they would let you in anything. They let you in any R-rated, which is how I discovered Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
Because they would let you in these R-rated movies. But I was not prepared for that, what I saw in that film, because there had never been special effects like that before. That was completely cutting edge. I mean, I couldn't sleep that night. That movie, and ironically, Eileen Dietz is the one who introduced me to my manager who does the horror film. She did all of the stuff that Linda couldn't do because she was underage. I end up knowing somebody from the film, on a pretty good level. So that's pretty funny.
How much fun was it to do Children of the Corn? Right, you seem like a kid, like a person that loves the horror genre. At the time, did you love horror? Was it pressure? I mean, you're working off a Stephen King adaptation.
Fan. And the reason, honestly, I just like a good story. If a story can suck me in, I'm in. I mean, when it goes too far and like, people's intestines are coming out or people's knees are getting drilled into and, torture porn, I'm not down for all that. I'm really not. I don't like violence. I saw violence growing up. I don't like violence. It makes me agitated. So I don't like watching movies with too much violence, to be honest. But as far as Back to Children of the Corn, was it fun? It was exciting because it was my first thing, but I was too serious about it to have fun. It was, for me, I had been studying for 5 years. This is what I wanted to do with my life. When I heard I got the job, I didn't even get excited. And my agent was like, aren't you excited? And I said, I'll be excited when the job is done. And because it was the moment of truth. Right. It was the moment, to me, at least that's how I saw it. It was the moment of truth. It's like, it's one thing to get into the big leagues. Now you got to stay in the big leagues, right? You got to actually be able to hang. So it was important for me to prove to myself and to prove to, the world that I could do this. So I wasn't messing around. It was that I had my game face on the whole time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, which is a great mindset because at the time you're still pretty young. I mean, to have that's a veteran's mentality, right? Let's talk when the project's over. That's a like a veteran move kind of mentality, right?
Yeah,
which is very impressive to have that at the age, in '84. That's the way you're thinking. That's really impressive, I think.
Oh, like I said, I was dead serious. And so what happened for me was when the movie was done, I remember that cornfield. There was something magical about that cornfield for some reason. I don't know why. But I remember standing in there and the wind was blowing. I was by myself and I knew at that moment I was an actor. Like I had crossed over to being an actor. And I knew at that point, like in my gut, this is what I was going to do in my life. And it turned out, when I got back, my mom, it wasn't, she hadn't seen the movie yet. She was like, you going to go get a job now? And I was like really offended. I was so mad. And I'm like, no, I'm an actor. And then I booked another job right away. I kind of had hard bodies kind of almost in the wings waiting for me. Because the director, Mark Griffin, had been in a class. He and Gino Havens, the casting director, are hard bodies. I'd been in a class that they taught for about 2 years, and he kind of co-wrote when he rewrote the movie. He tailor made that role for me. I had to come in and audition, but it was kind of a foregone conclusion. So within less than a month, I was back to work, and then I got done with Hard Bodies, and I jumped right on that movie Lust in the Dust, and was in New Mexico shooting with all these great veteran actors. And I stayed 2 more weeks just to watch these guys all work, to watch people like Jeffrey Lewis and Tab Hunter and Cesar Romero and Lainey Kazan. And Henry Silva. I was just soaking these veteran actors, man.
Legends, legends, all of them. Legends.
Absolutely. And they were all really cool with me. And I learned a lot watching them. They were great.
So I don't know how you feel about this, but to most degrees, it bothers me, right? Like, how would you feel if they remade Children of the Corn? I would be bothered by it personally because I would be.
It's not. I don't take it personally because it's not. I don't own it, right?
Right.
I mean, it's a business, right? I think, for whenever anybody tries to do a remake, which they did do, Sci-Fi did a remake with Don Borchers, the original producer, Children of the Corn, directed it. And then they're doing a prequel right now that's supposed to come out soon that I think might be good because it has some really good producers attached. But I think, for any young actor stepping into those 2 roles, John's role and my role, would just be a tough task. right? It's just you would forever be compared to us, and I think that's unfair, but that's what would happen. That's what would happen.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, I transitioning quickly to Back to the Future, I know this is when people interview, these are the movies they focus on, and rightfully so. Because
we can go down the list, whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. You're the second guest I've had from Back to the Future. I had Harry Waters Jr., who played Marvin Barry. As I look back, this movie, I feel like gets more special by the year. And I feel like this movie, and I hate to use this analogy, it's so cheesy, but I feel like it's like wine, right? This movie gets better with age, and I'm at the point where I'm an older dad. I'm 47. I have a 1-year-old daughter, but I am so psyched to be able to show her like your work, right? Like Back to the Future and eventually Children of the Corn when she's ready. And when I get to Can't Buy Me Love, we're really going to have a great discussion about that. But, I don't know. I just feel like, am I being over the top with that, Courtney?
Well, if you're nostalgic for 80s films, what's the bigger film? Back to the Future, I think, is like it, right?
Right.
So if you're nostalgic for 80s films, or you can only get more nostalgic for that trilogy. I think that's sort of like the epitome of 80s cinema.
Yeah. And when you do interviews, do you feel like what's the movie you feel people kind of focus on the most, or do you feel like each of your movies has touched people in a different way?
I think a lot of times, Corn becomes the focus initially, but usually it's, especially if they're into horror at all or whatever, they're going to want to talk about that, But there's, I had a really, really good 80s run, man. It was a really, really good run. I had a successful movie in every genre, and that was just really fortunate for that to be the case. And I had made my mind up after Corn not to do the same thing twice. I didn't want to be pigeonholed and just playing that dude for the rest of my life. So,
right.
So I was able to pull that off, and that I feel in the long term was the thing. I sort of proved that I had range. And I think that bode well for me for the rest of the ride. And obviously, I haven't done things I've done a few decent things, but not as much high profile successful projects. But I'm as proud of hanging in for 35 years as I am of anything.
Yeah, you're a successful working actor, and that's just a fact. And yeah, your 80s run was phenomenal. But it's some people have a run and they stop. You're still a working actor, which in itself is amazing. Less than 1%, 2% of people that start off acting are doing it for 35 years. That's insane, Courtney. That's great.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. And I've seen both sides. I've seen people go from star to superstar working with them. I've seen people in their first movie who've gone to be, huge. Like I worked with Don Cheadle in Colors, whatever. But I've also seen a ton of people that I started in this business that, are, like you said, they don't work anymore. So I'm fortunate that I've been able to do it this long, and it's been a grind. It hasn't all just been, offers and me reading, having a pile of scripts by my bed. I've had to audition and go out there and get jobs. It's not like it all has just been handed to me. You have to keep being a yes. You have to keep being willing, and you have to keep being willing to prove yourself again and again, and keep yourself in classes and be fresh about, what you're doing. And it's not easy. Doing that for 35 years. Most people burn out. And I'm at that point now where I kind of am, I'm kind of a little burned out at the grind of it all, but now we can do self-tapes. So at least I don't have to go to, slog over the 405, for an audition, that's nice.
Yeah. And I feel like you're at the point of your life where, I don't know, should you have to audition? Doesn't your body of work speak for itself? And I know you're not that kind of, but isn't that?
It's easy to go there, right? It's easy for, for lack of a better word, for the ego to go there and say, yeah, man, I have 100 credits. What do you want? But I always tell this story because it was the one that helped put me in perspective at a young age. And it was from Mark Griffin, again, the director of Hard Bodies, who I did a couple projects for. He told me a story of an actress, I'm not going to say who the actress is, who came into an audition, and the director didn't know who she was, and she had been a very big actress at one point, and she had this big purse, and she opened the purse, and she slams an Academy Award on the table. And the director's like, oh, wow, you have an Academy Award. That's really impressive. Okay, so you're ready to read? She pulls into her purse and pulls out another Academy Award and slams it on the table. And still, he expected her to read, and she left. And the moral of the story is she didn't get the job.
That is fantastic.
And I'll tell you, for, when I was getting a little cocky because I was on a good run in the 80s, that was a good lesson. That was a real good lesson to get.
Yeah, that's well said. And just a quick question about Back to the Future. Michael J. Fox was doing Family Ties during the day, coming back and then doing, Back to the Future at night. Do you think if Eric Stoltz hadn't been, let go, do you think the project would have been as successful as it is today? And that's not to undermine Michael J. Fox because he's freaking perfect, and as the whole cast is. But could it have worked almost in the same way with Stoltz, or do you think that would have just completely changed the whole dynamic of the thing?
Yeah, it's really hard to say, right? I mean, that's like, I never saw the dailies of Stoltz to have an opinion. I just know, the word was he wasn't funny, right? So he was taking himself seriously, being method, asked to be called Marty. But I didn't have, I think I worked one day that he was on that same set, but we didn't actually have any interchange. So I just don't know. I probably not, just because if he had been serious, it would have fallen, more flat. Where something about, Michael J. Fox is just so likable, right? I mean, there's a likability factor that he has that, and I think, in quote unquote, just normal people's eyes, they judge actors as being good or bad based on how much they like them or not, right? Not about their acting ability, but their likability. And, I've played a lot of characters who aren't likable, so I understand. But yeah, I mean, as far as the likability factor, I mean, that's something that he's almost like a commercial, you know what I mean? You just like him. He's just warm and fuzzy, Yeah.
And I've waited a long time to talk to you about this movie. I want to say a long time. And that is the most underrated movie to come out of the 80s, Can't Buy Me Love. And we need to set something straight right now, Courtney, that this movie is not a chick flick. So like Pretty Woman.
Well, when I need to guess if a girl's seen a movie, it's usually the yes, but I understand guys like it too. But I'm just saying that and Sweet Home Alabama are my chick flicks. I stand by that.
I got to say, Ronald and Kenneth's relationship is every 80s, like if you had a friend and, best friend and, going for popularity, it's just, man, it's so beautiful, but I'm going to work my way there. So, when I look at the top grossing movies of 87, it's an unbelievable thing to me domestically, right? Because if we had to release these movies today, they all be, never mind top 5 in 87, it'd be top 5, maybe all time in their categories. The number 29 movie was Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which is insane to me.
Oh, wow.
Lost Boys was 33. Can't Buy Me Love was 34, which is insane. Hoosiers was 47. Raising Arizona, 49. That's insane.
Raising Arizona's my favorite, top 3 comedies of all time.
That's what I'm saying. I just feel like it's just an insane thing when you look at this.
That's a hell of a lineup, man. Wow.
Yeah. 87 was a phenomenal year for movies, But, for me, Can't Buy Me Love, when you look back at this movie, what are your best? What do you take away from this? What's the one memory you take away when you look? Because your filmography is very impressive, as we mentioned. Still a really successful.
I think Can't Buy Me Love is an important '80s film. I think sometimes it is a little underrated because it actually did really, really well. It was the number 3 movie of the summer.
Mm-hmm.
It was, and nowadays, if you had a movie that successful in the summer, you'd be a freaking movie star, So it just summer blockbusters tentpole thing wasn't really happening yet,
Yeah.
So it was a very successful film. But moreover, it was a film I was proud to be part of just because of the message,
Yeah.
I've had jocks come up to me and say, yeah, I was going in when I was a football player. I was going into my senior year. I was looking forward to razzing the freshmen, and then I saw that movie and I couldn't do it. And I'm just like, wow, power of cinema, man. Yeah, that movie kept some scrub from getting tortured. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And Kenneth knows that Ronald threw shit on his house and his friends are killing him at lunch, and Kenneth still has his back. He still has his back. And that scene where Kenneth, pulls Ronald and goes, "You threw shit at my house." That is one of the most, and you're going to think I'm a wuss. I tear up every time I see that scene.
No, I don't think you're a wuss. I think it's a very powerful, I think for, again, a teen cinema movie, it's a very powerful moment. And I always tell the story that, when Disney Touchstone acquired the film, they wanted to cut that scene out because they felt it sort of peaked the movie, the ending too soon, and it was just too serious. And Jerry Henshaw, the producer, who was this guy had been around forever, started this company. He was the head of this little company called Apollo Films, and it was the second movie I'd done for them. He got up, all 400 pounds of him, and started pounding the desk and said, "You're not taking that that scene out of my bleeping movie." And they backed down, thank God, because it ended up being, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that scene in that moment too. I've told this story before too, but I'm proud of it. That at that point, Steve Rash, the director, who I was excited to get to work with because he'd done the Buddy Holly story, which I thought was a great little film.
Phenomenal.
And so I was excited to get to work with him. He was a very cool and accessible guy. And by that point, we had worked together long enough that he was open, to what I thought. I don't go talking like, what do I think, unless someone asks, you know what I mean? It's like, it's just, you're not, I'm being paid to act. I'm not being paid to tell you how to write your movie. You know what I mean? But at that point he said, let's go rehearse the scene. And which we never really did a lot of either, but obviously it was a very important scene. And we sat there and he said, well, what do you think? And I said, there's this whole dialogue, like, I was your friend, I did it for free, blah, blah. I said, I would cut all of it. He's like, he was shocked because obviously actors are supposed to want lines, right? What would you say? I said, I'd say there's one line, you shit on my house.
You could at least acknowledge my existence. You think this is easy for me? I know I was an asshole to you and to thousands of others. Kenneth, it's you I gotta straighten this out with. You shit on my house, man. No. You shit on my house! You shit on my house. I know.
And he's like, okay, let's do that. And that's what we did. And, it went on to be, something in the lexicon of pop culture, which I think is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. And you look at, this is 87, and how serious bullying has been, in the last few years, maybe even longer. And, that there's kids going through this, and to be betrayed by your own friend. What a Judas moment. Like, it's like you, man, like of all the people, you, I don't know.
Right.
It's just
and that's what I wanted. At that point, the nerd found his strength. It's one thing to get picked on by somebody. It's another thing to be violated by a friend.
That's so well said. And let me ask you. So Ronald takes all this grief, right? I feel like Sidney Mancini escapes a lot of it, and rest in peace to Amanda Patterson. But does Ronald take too much? I feel like she kind of escapes a lot of her share of this.
I mean, I guess so. But, she was, quote unquote, she was shallow to begin with, and she grew. All right. So she, whereas he was supposed to be, an understanding character who became shallow and then grew, so he had to take his comeuppance, I guess.
Yeah. I just, and the ending, you talk about an iconic ending, riding off on a tractor.
It's a great, I mean, when I saw it, I was just like, oh man, what a great, I was like, we got a movie here,
Yeah. And just a few more things to let you go. You give me all this time. Colors is so freaking underrated. You've worked with some pretty special people, Hanks, Duvall, Dern. The greats. Are you a guy that, I know you're clearly professional, you do what you have to do, but when it comes to those guys, are you, or girls, some of the female actresses you work are phenomenal as well. Do you find yourself listening a little bit harder, looking a little bit harder at these talented actors that you see on set?
Well, they just, I'm motivated, right? Right. So it's like, and I think as an actor, you have to have a bit of a bit of an ego in terms of believing in yourself, and so like I see it when I get a chance to work with them, I'm excited, but I'm also like, I'm up for the challenge, right? Like obviously I'll never be as big as, Tom Hanks or whatever, right? But I'd like to think I could hang with him, right? So it's like, I'm always like, you know, if this was boxing, you wouldn't want to get in the ring with me. That's how I feel about it. So I love to get in there and mix it up with people that are talented, you know? I love it. And, you know, someone like Bruce Dern, I got to work with him again, like 2 years ago in a movie called Hellblazer that hasn't come out yet. But at 70, his mind was still twice as fast as mine. You know, that brain is so quick. You can't even keep up with him. Like, you try to improv with him, he'll eat you alive. He's just so good, you know? But yeah, I love it. I would rather, you know, hey, if you're going to get smoked by somebody, get smoked by somebody like Bruce Dern, you know?
Yeah. And it's really, you know, in Colors, you know, going back and forth here, in Colors, it's just it's a unique role, right? Because he's in Whitey's in a Latino gang. He's a little bit different than everybody else. He's the minority in this gang. Which
was my true experience in life. I grew up in Chicano neighborhoods in Los Angeles.
Right.
And that's what Gerardo Mejia and I, we were on our second film together shooting Can't Buy Me Love, and he had gotten the script for the role of Bird, which he eventually actually got. And he knew. And so when he read it, he came right to me and he like came knocking on my hotel room door. He's like, dude, there's this script and it's got the gangs and there's actually a white dude in the gangs. He's like, you got to get in on this. And it just, fortunately, my manager was my mentor, Virgil Fry. He knew Dennis Hopper pretty well. He helped him make Easy Rider. And matter of fact, Virgil has a role in Colors as well. There's some great people that have small roles now, like Seymour Cassell. And, I mean, you know, just all these people that Dennis Hopper was just throwing little jobs to, but they're great actors, you know.
And good on him for remembering you for that role, right? Because that's a really selfless move. Hey, man, there's a role for a white guy here. I think
it was huge.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gerardo, big time. And then the fact that we ended up both getting it and literally doing 3 movies in a row. I'll tell a little story since you brought up the Gerardo component. So our first day of shooting was the scene where we're in the powerhouse, you know, where the guy's trying to get us out of the gangs, and Gerardo has that great scene on "Ni primero es numero uno," Holmes. You know, that's like Gerardo's biggest moment in the movie.
Yeah.
And it's our first day, and Dennis Hopper comes walking up to us with a cigar in his hand. And, you know, Dennis Hopper's intense, man. I mean, intense. And he looks at us all, and he goes, "This scene means a lot to me, man, because they think I'm making a cop movie, but I'm really making a movie about these gangs in L.A." And like, so now it's our first day, and now the pressure's on, right? He's like, this scene is one of the most important scenes of the movie. He just sets this tone, right? And then Gerardo has this big speech, and it's not going well. And Dennis Hopper just keeps going, do it again, no direction, nothing, just do it again. I mean, Gerardo's almost in tears at this point, like 10 takes in or something, right? And he turns to me and he's just like, you know, with his eyes, he's just like, "Courtney, what the fuck? Help me out." And I came up to him, and I don't remember what I said, but I said something. I taught acting, right? And, you know, I was trained by my mentor, and I said something that clicked in, and Hopper saw me talking to him. He's like, "Whitey, get the hell away from my actor." And then he nailed it. That was the take that they used. He nailed it. And then Dennis Hopper just looked at me like, "What in the hell did you say to that dude?" You know? But he never asked. He never praised me. Nothing. He's just like, "Moving on."
So what is you kind of just answered this, but you know, when I think of Dennis Hopper, I think of, you know, so many movies. I think even Hoosiers, he's so great in.
He's great in Hoosiers, man.
Yeah.
I mean, Hoosiers is a great movie, but he's great in it.
Yeah,
no doubt.
As a director, you said very intense. Was he like talk about that a little bit, because I can't picture him as a director, right? I know what kind of actor he is, he was one of the most difficult directors to work with in my whole career, and got more out of me than anybody when you consider my character was like the 87th on the call sheet, like literally the 87th on the call sheet. Wow.
He's intense, and his directing style was very interesting. Well, he's kind of a chameleon. He deals with people differently based on what he thinks their level is, right? So like with Sean's intent, you know, Sean was intense, but he had done his research. He knew what he was doing. So he'd have to deal with him from like, an actor to actor peer group conversation. And he would always Sean would always want to talk about stuff before the scenes, and it would take a while. And whereas Duvall would just listen most of the time. And if he had something to say, it would always be really pertinent and then move things forward, usually get things going. So it was very interesting to watch him do that. But the one time I saw him give Duvall any direction was, when the first time they meet the gang, and Sean Penn's character pulls the shotgun. And he's like, "Hey, put that shit away," and keeps talking. After 3 takes, Dennis Hopper just went down there to them, and this is all he said. He said, he just pulled a gun on those guys. And that's all he needed to say. All of a sudden, Duvall's taking that note and really taking in how he's blown the relationship with these kids. And all of a sudden the whole dynamic of the second half of the scene changed, because he dealt with them peer to peer, actor to actor. Now with us, all these young actors, he didn't do that at all. He didn't respect us as, method actors or whatever. He would just like throw the scene out in a big, very loose way. Like, okay, like you guys are jumping him into the gang, go. And so then like no choreography, nothing. So, like, pretty kind of crazy and dangerous. But then, like, after we jump him in, the next beat of the scene is supposed to be where his brother comes in, gets him and says, "Hey, you fucked up, you joined the gang." I'm still talking to the guy, and he's like, he would just yell, like, "Whitey, get the hell out of there!" But what happened is, because he would leave so much looseness like that, I would just be playing the moments, but most of the other actors were so scared, they would just get out of there as fast as they could, or try to stay out of the way the best they could. Whereas me, he didn't say, it's wide open, play it. So I would sometimes get in trouble because I would actually, act. Yeah. But at the same time, like, he saw me playing guitar in my trailer, sitting on the stoops of my trailer. He remembers that, goes and has me play guitar in the movie. Like, nothing got past that dude. Like, he milked it for everything he could get out of you.
Yeah. And, that's really well said. I can listen to those. That's fantastic. And, one of the, Sweet Home Alabama, another great underrated movie. If you said chick flick for this one, I'd be like, okay, maybe, but it's still, what an enjoyable, wonderful movie, right?
It plays all the time on TV still. It's great. That was a lot of fun to be involved in. It was great to, I remember when I heard Patrick had gotten on the project, and as soon as I saw him, I said, "You, me, on another movie with a soundtrack to a song?" I said, "You're about to blow up again." And exactly what happened.
Yeah, and I can't let you off the hook.
Exactly what happened.
Yeah, and I can't let you off the hook without talking about your music career. I was watching Ripple Street, Slab City today. You are a phenomenally talented musician. I have other actors that call themselves musicians, and it's basically them just strumming a guitar in a basement with a camera. You are legitimate. Like, you are very good. Not that I expected differently, but people...
No. I understand. Actors always get a bad rap, and a lot of the times rightly so. But that's all. I figure I use it to my advantage. I figure expectations are low, so anything that can exceed those expectations is good. I'm not like a great singer, and I'm not like a shredding guitar player. But what I think I am is a good songwriter. I think that's what I am. Whether it be writing just lyrics to a song like Slab City. We brought in a new guitar player, and him and the bass player have been writing. And I just, I've been doing the vocals for this next EP we're putting out. But you click with people and you can write, or you can't. And we're just clicking. We're working on our next song, Unlock, right now. And I think it's gonna be fun. Very kind of 80s rock tune. I think it's going to be good. I'm liking where it's going. But I love the creative process of writing. That's really where the joy of music is for me. Recording's fun. Performing's all right. Writing is the real rush.
Yeah, and on that point, earlier in the year, Adam Levine was on Howard Stern, and Howard asked him, what do you think the greatest written songs in history are? And he said, "God Only Knows" by the Beach Boys and "In Your Eyes" by Peter Gabriel. What's your take on that?
Those are no slouches. Both of those are great. I grew up, again, like I said, grew up in tough neighborhoods. Oldies were a thing, in the neighborhood. Like, everybody listened to oldies. So, for me, "Tell It Like It Is right up there as one of the greatest songs ever written, as far as I'm concerned.
No,
when I even think about it, it gives me chills. And I don't get chills a lot over material, but it does. It really, Aaron Neville's voice is maybe the sweetest voice I've ever heard. You know, it literally makes me start to tear up.
He's almost underrated, I feel like. I feel like he should be mentioned in the same breath, he is so underappreciated, I feel like, in some ways.
It's weird. It's like an interesting dance, right? The Neville brothers are known, and he's certainly known, and certainly in New Orleans are hugely respected, and he has had success, speaking pop culture wise, but he's never been like a breakout star. But man, he's great.
Yeah. So my last question for you, and I have to ask you this. I had a lead singer from a metal band called Dangerous Toys on, and he said he brought this up, that if he had one album to bring with him on a deserted island, he would bring Judas Priest. I think I have my answer. Would you bring Aaron Neville, or is there another one album that you would bring with you?
Well, if I only had a single to bring, it would be Tell It Like It Is, I think. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I think if I had to bring an album, I think it's, one of the most popular concept albums of all time. It's not like I'm out of the box here, but it'd probably be Dark Side of the Moon.
Ah, good one. I got to tell you, Courtney, man, it's been I've known you longer than you've known me, but I'm going to tell you, it's been a pleasure, and I cannot thank you enough from the bottom of my heart for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you. Well, it was a pleasure meeting you, and, thank you for all the nice and kind things you've said.
Every child is afraid of the dark, the unknown, the nightmare. In Gatlin, Nebraska, that nightmare is in the corn. Stephen King's Children of the Corn.
Praise God! Praise the Lord!
From Stephen King, the author of Carrie, The Shining, The Dead Zone, and Christine, an adult nightmare. Children of the Corn.
I'm here, Lord! I'm ready!
Stephen King's Children of the Corn, an adult nightmare.